baptizing a 3-month-old, marrying 24-year-olds, burying 86-year-olds. Baptisms, weddings, and funerals create a weekly sequence for a minister. And it's wonderful to see how poignant and beautiful life is every week walking through that sequence. And it creates for me a rhythm and a certain sensibility that life flows onward and life is short. Now, I don't mean that in any melancholy way at all, because death is not the end. I don't mean life is short in any fearful or tragic way at all, because death is not the end. Reality is made of consciousness. Reality is held by that infinite consciousness we call God. Consciousness cannot end. The journey goes onward. And when I say life is short, I mean it makes it so much more special. Cherish it. Baptisms, weddings, and funerals tether me to time. But time is not so linear, really. Time can fold in upon itself. Just last week, I was at a conference for ministers in Ohio, and this meeting happened to be at the same church camp I grew up at. In fact, at one point, my dad was a minister in the church and was director of that very camp. I grew up at this camp, had some of the key spiritual experiences of my life, and as soon as I got there, I ran down to the lake because I remembered the high dive that was at the lake. There it was. You had to walk out this thin pier and then climb up these steps, and it was only about 10 feet over the water that the board was. But I remember as a child how awesome that was. But fearful, and you'd walk out that pier and everyone would be watching, and I remember as a 9-year-old how scary it was. So I went right out the pier. I walked up the steps. I walked all the way out to the end of the board. 50 years later, I'm standing at the end of that diving board, looking around at the hills and the lake. But the board was sort of bobbing up and down. And I became dizzy and sort of a vertigo feeling, and I'm standing at the end of the board, and suddenly I wasn't sure that I could turn around on that little board and get off. And there it was, time merged, and I was again little Jimmy scared on the high dive board. There was a homespun proverb that began to frame our life together at First-Plymouth. Otis Young began to speak this proverb so many times, in fact, it's embedded itself into the walls. He would tell us, and it became almost a mantra here, still is. He would say, life is good. Let it go. Be happy now. And as I hear that again, I must tell you, my mind has always added a little bit of a clause to that. Even almost unconsciously, I say life is good and life is short. So let it go. Be happy now. Now. That proverb here began in the 1970s, but time folds in on itself. And it feels like in 2022, we need to speak it again. Life is good. It's short, but life is good. Let it go. Be happy now. We need to say this in our time. Life is good. We live in a time filled with so many negative narratives. We live in a time where all of the talk is about chaos and degeneration and deterioration and losing our way. We need to say again, life is good. Now, first remember with me, when Otis was teaching that, he was being completely biblical. Remember, our whole scripture starts in the first chapter of Genesis with this repeated refrain, it was good. As God creates all that is, when God creates light, God saw that it was good. When God created the stars, God saw that it was good. It repeats it again and again in chapter 1. When God created animals and vegetation, God saw it was good. When God created male and female in God's image, created male and female, and then on the sixth day, God saw it was all good. Life is good. We need to say it. Because there's so many other storylines these days that are about how bad life is. Did you see that Atlantic Monthly article that gained so much traction a few weeks ago? It was another declinist narrative. Oh, there's a word of our decade, declinist. There's all these stories of decline. This was yet another declinist narrative. It was interesting. He claims, Jonathan Haidt, the author, claims that we rarely take stock of how have the last 10 years been. And he claims that our last 10 years have been uniquely bad. As he sort of crassly puts it, the last 10 years have made us stupider. What he means is, and this is interesting, that you might not have been tracking it, but in 2011, social media changed. Its algorithms, the nature of the platform, and the way Americans used it to have conversations with one another changed. And over those 10 years, the way social media creates our conversations has been a massive dumbing down. He claims that our institutions, schools, churches, government, businesses, our institutions need to be a place of complex conversations, but that social media has turned it all into tribal, aggressive language, simplified language, and no one can have a complex conversation anymore. He says we don't notice how this has doubled down in these last 10 years. Interesting. But still, my friends, we need to claim that life is good, even as we hold all the challenges of our day. The essence of the line, life is good, is this: it doesn't have to be perfect to be good. Oh, but this is what we imagine, that everything would have to be perfect. The world is never going to be a perfect place, but we have to take hold that it's good. Oh, the way people internalize the negativity these days. In conversations with folks, I sense they've embedded it in their own self-image, that as I talk with people, they think they're not good enough. You don't have to be perfect as a person to be good. In fact, I know this for a fact. You're not perfect. Nobody's perfect, but you are good. Oh, the anxiety among parents that I sense. Are they a good parent? You don't have to be a perfect parent to be good. You are good enough. Oh, it's as if we have to speak this proverb again into our time. Life is good. Let it go. let it go. In 1978, Otis Young preached a sermon about relinquishment. He was trying to teach the depth of his proverb, relinquishment. He said, all of life includes this rhythm, but in our culture, what we are taught is acquisition. We're not taught relinquishment. We are taught to acquire things, to acquire achievements, things, friendships, relationships. We are taught acquisition, but never learn to let go. Now, our elders begin to learn this lesson as later in life, when so many of your friends die or you no longer work, you have to learn relinquishment. That life is good, but you have to let go. But at any point in our life, you need to have that rhythm of acquisition and relinquishment because so many things are changing, and you have to be able to let go and relinquish and then move forward. Life is good. In that sermon, Otis Young taught about how ancient cultures would trap monkeys. He said they would hollow out a big log, and then they would put a delicious piece of fruit inside the log and then make a little hole on the outside, just big enough for a monkey to squeeze its hand in there. And the monkey would squeeze its hand in there, take hold of the fruit, but you can't pull the fist and the fruit back out that little hole. You would have to let go to be free, but a monkey will keep holding that piece of fruit. Think of how many resentments or regrets that you might be holding on to. You would be set free if you could let go more. All those woulda, coulda, shouldas, all those regrets. I bet you're holding on to a certain list of grievances about our world, about other people. In fact, in a town like Lincoln, you might have a very distinct set of grievances because we have these long relationships. You might see that person on the street that didn't treat you very well in high school, and they're on your list, right? And you might have someone you did a business deal with 22 years ago, but they didn't treat you fairly, and you've got that list. You have to let that go. In Matthew, Jesus was teaching forgiveness is not a one-time thing. It's a constant thing. Letting go, letting go. Life is good. Let it go. Be happy now. You see, we always imagine we'll finally be happy sometime in the future. This is what we do. But my friends, life is short. Be happy now. We imagine that something outside of ourselves will finally make us happy. The right possessions or material things or the right achievements, whatever. It's always something outside of ourselves that will make Jim happy. Nothing outside of yourself can make you happy. You have to claim for yourself your happiness. Now. Life is good. It's short, but life is good. Let it go. Be happy now. And now, my friends, I believe there's one clause that I need to add for 2022. I need to add one thing, and here it is. Life is good, let it go, be happy now, and think for yourself. Yes, in 2022, it feels like we keep sliding into this surly form of groupthink. And the social media tribes create this type of sloganeering, and we begin to share each other's language and parrot and mouth phrases that we hear. And we need to think for ourselves. More and more, it seems to you that there are two sides to an issue. And so you take a side and you begin to repeat the phrases you've heard. But my friends, there are not two sides to an issue. Any complex issue has so many nuances and so many different possibilities. There's not two sides, but we live in this illusion that everybody's got to take a side. There's not two sides. Any complex issue is going to demand so many different perspectives. You need to think for yourself. The world needs you to think for yourself and bring your unique takes and perspective. You are a unique consciousness. The way you would perceive the complex challenges of our time, they would be unique to you. We need you to think for yourself, not just parrot slogans you've heard. You know, we imagine in our day that it's important to have, say, political parties, and that you're supposed to agree with a political party. That's not thinking for yourself. You should never completely agree with anything. Well, except Jesus Christ. Got that? Okay, well, except Jesus. Think for yourself. You would have idiosyncratic perspectives that the world needs. Don't feel this conforming, lemming-like, goose-stepping pressure that you're afraid to say what you think. We need to know what you think. That you need to challenge yourself to discover what your perspectives are. And when I do say follow Jesus Christ, I actually do mean in your way too. Find your way to follow Jesus Christ. So in our time, let's take hold. Life is good. Life is good. Let it go. All those regrets and resentments. Be happy now and think for yourself. Immanuel Kant, the great philosopher of the Enlightenment, when we were coming out of authoritarian structures and discovering science and free thinking, the Enlightenment, Immanuel Kant said in this key essay, sapere aude. Sapere aude. He was using a Latin phrase that means dare to think. But what it really means in the Latin is dare to think for yourself. Don't take everything on the basis of authority or tradition. Think for yourself. Sapere aude. Oh, my friends, life is good. Let it go. Be happy now. Think for yourself.